Good evening. Good evening. Happy Sunday evening. I am the host of Let's Talk Maywood, Dr. Reggie Ratliff. Welcome to Diversity Today Media. And joining me at this moment is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. Terry, good evening.
What's going on? How you doing, Dr. Ratliff?
Good, man. Attended worship service, got the word, who is this? Preached out of Matthew. My pastor, what's his name? Dr. Henry P. Duran. Great man of God, anointed orator, but very knowledgeable of the word of God. Talked about who is Jesus, this man who, rises from the grave on the third day. This is Palm Sunday, getting ready for Easter next week. And, I am the vice president of evangelism ministry at my church here in Northern Virginia. And it's a joy, man. I always give back, man. Just to be a blessing to others, because the others were a blessing to me growing up, in the village of Maywood through, Friendship Baptist Church in Chicago, the west side of Chicago, before, attending Second Baptist Church under the late pastor W.W. Sykes, who was a mammoth during his time, especially when it came to community matters. Definitely one that's part of the civil rights movement. And, I say all that to say it's all about giving back, man. Your time, your talent, your treasure. And every time I go to church, to worship service, whether in person or online, it's always, a good feeling, a fulfillment for me and my family. So how are things going with you?
It's funny. It's funny that you say that. This is probably the second Sunday in a row that I ain't been at church, but don't hold that against me, right? And seeing that it's Easter, next Sunday I probably ain't going because I don't want to be that guy and be like, I went to church at Christmas and then I went on Easter too.
Right. Yeah, don't forget Mother's Day.
However,
Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day.
I like,
For sure.
They go to church 4 times a year, right?
Right.
Man, you brought something up. I want to ask you something before we get. Go ahead.
Now you go.
So this is Financial Literacy Month. April is, right? And so this is kind of why we, probably should get on and say something, right? We talk about finance, 12 months out the year. So it's nothing new. But you said something I was going to ask you about since you started off talking about church and tithing, right?
Yeah.
Tithing, you said time, talent, and treasure. And I've heard many people preach that. Tithing, when they talked about tithing, a talent, the value of a talent was actually money. And so are they mixing this concept in a way that they should not be when literally when they say the 10 talents, I think the story was where one guy buried them, one guy grew his talent, and the other one grew his but not as much as the other guy. But so talent is what is it? It's money, right?
In part, it's also a gift. Your talent is a gift. Are you, what are you good at? Are you good at baking? Are you good at math? Are you good with, helping the homeless? So they're talking about your talents. And so in that case of that, you're talking about the Bible, it was a case of money. What did you do with your money? So you got blessed. One, also stored it, buried it. And because of that, he was not blessed. And so when you talk about talent, you talk about what can you do when you invest that's going to bless others. And because of that, you're going to be a blessing. You're going to receive blessing because you are a blessing to others in essence. So it's not just about,
money. Isn't that isn't that the core of what we talk about? Because if we use the Bible as a yardstick, and the guy that invested his money and grew his money was the one that
Yeah.
got the biggest benefit. Is that right?
Right. That's correct. That's right. Yeah. So the
And
windows of
so
heaven came out, poured out a blessing that was abundant. It was an abundancy,
yeah,
because his hands were not closed; they were open. And when your hands are open, you receive, you're giving, and you're receiving blessing. But with closed hands, as my pastor, Dr. Beauchamp said, when your hands are closed, nothing is going out, but nothing is coming in. So you have to invest. You have to give in order to receive. You can't. You're not going to receive if you're not
yeah.
giving of yourself. So, and that's why we're here on earth to be able to.
And but not only that though, and I don't want to get too deep into the tithing conversation, because that's a rabbit hole, and it's one of those things that we kind of would get down. It takes too long, right? It's going to be that's a whole show in itself. However, the one part that I want to focus on, the part that we stay in, is the investment part, right?
Yeah.
God says
Yeah.
He blesses the 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 unworthy is they can get blessings too, right? And so yeah, and so at the end of the day, yeah, we see these guys that are not Christian, and they use their money for evil things and things like this.
Right.
But the value and the thing that they do when they invest, it's gonna matter. The S&P 500 don't know if you're Christian or not Christian, right? And so therefore, the benefit then becomes the same.
So I got to tell you this, Terry. I got to share this because I'm not sure if you heard this story now about, because I know everybody talk about Malachi 3:10. Never in that the entire Bible talk about and all that kind of stuff. Having good credit and all that. But there's a story, a tale that a man went to his pastor and he said, "Pastor, I know what Malachi 3:10 says, but should I give him my gross income or should I give him my net income?" And the pastor said, "It all depends. Do you want a gross blessing or do you want a net blessing?" It's like, what? Because it doesn't say whether you give gross or net. Yeah. But I mean, it's gross. But like you said, I digress because that's an entire separate conversation. But I will say this: more churches, particularly Black churches, should get involved in financial education, Terry, because we don't. And you wonder why the church don't have money to fix a boiler in the wintertime or install a new AC system in the summertime, because you're not using that money wisely. Not to say you're doing it for diabolical reasons or evil, but you're not being prudent with the finances and educating the congregation about finance. So that's all I'll say about that. We got to do better.
No. I've had this conversation a lot where, numerous of preachers, their approach is, "Hey, would you come and bless my church?" Which is basically, "Would you write a check?" But when I offer, "Hey, let me set up a curriculum for you," I've yet to find a pastor to be like, "Okay," because I'm not asking to look at your books. I'm saying, let's put a curriculum together that can move people from giving an offering to giving a tithe, right? And so, it's a hard conversation, and I think some of the problem is that pastors often want to be the ones to teach the class, right? When they talk about finance, they want to be the one, and then they pull from the Bible and famously, "How will a man rob God?" Right? And it's more to it than that, though, right?
Yeah.
More to it than that. And so, I'm hopeful. I'm a church kid.
No doubt.
And
yeah, you PK.
yeah. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
But you know, I mean, there's some churches, Terry, even starting in Maywood, when I was at Rock of Ages, you know, in early 2000s, Pastor Marvin Wiley allowed me to teach financial education, you know, on Sunday mornings during Sunday school time, you know, in the Vision of
mm-hmm.
not the Vision of Restoration, but the Spiritual Growth and Development Center across the street from the church. And then we go over, you know, have worship service at 11 a.m. So we had that, and then I was able to teach classes with, like I mentioned before, Dr. Ronald K. Beauchamp, also from Maywood. So there were a few churches here and there that was open to it, but I have to say here in the DMV, I give a shout out to St. Stephen's Church in Camp Springs, Maryland, under Bishop Twyman. You know, he and a good friend of mine out here, Deacons Kennard Jones, allow us to teach financial education classes that relate to investments and things like that. And you know, just a couple other churches out here. But you and I, Terry, you and I have talked and taught and facilitated financial education classes going back to the early 2000s at Triton College. And then we go to other churches who are open for us facilitating classes. So we aren't new to this. We're true to this. And we've been doing this for over 2 decades. We didn't just start last year, or we didn't just start in 2022 when we started doing this podcast. You know, we've been doing this. We may not be as popular as some people, particularly those who are getting these huge grants. But you and I have put in the work. You know, we're out here. You know, we're out here in the vineyard working. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Honestly, you know, for me, I have struggled with how much I do this because, honestly, when it comes to investing, there are a lot of false narratives out there. People making assumptions about what's happening in white families versus black families, and really, you know, if you understand it, it's not about white versus black. It's kind of rich versus poor, right? And white people that I know that don't make a lot of money, they have the same problems as black people that don't make a lot of money or don't have a lot of experience investing. They're afraid, and therefore they're not consistent, and they don't put enough money in, right?
Well, let's talk about the stock market. You know, we're talking about the money that is, you know, we're down since Donald Trump moved into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But we don't invest. You know, black people, we don't invest. And we see investments as the 401k plan or the 403 plan if you work for the government or nonprofit entity or a school or whatever. That's not true investing. You know, put your money where your mouth is. You know, these are publicly traded companies that talk about the 3 indices. You know, you're talking about the NASDAQ, the Standard and Poor's, and, you know, the Dow Jones. So they're looking at these indices. Of course, there are 11 industries across the board, but these are publicly traded companies. That's where you come in, because you are a certified investment advisor. So when I see individuals who are talking about, you know, investing and they don't have the qualifications, what you're doing is you're poisoning the mindset of our community, because you're not qualified to do it. So we need people like you and me who are certified, who have, you know, went through the halls of higher academia, have been trained, have worked in that environment to be able to put that real information out there.
So yeah, the truth of what happens is, there's so much noise in the marketplace, right? And so, number one, when it comes to investing, people tend to not want to share their information because they look like $1,000,000. They don't want to tell people that they don't have enough money to actually invest. They don't want to tell people that they have, you know, underinvested in their 401k plans and things like this. And so it becomes hard to have a real conversation about where they're headed, what they need to do. And the most common thing out there is buy mutual funds, in particular, buy low cost mutual funds, in particular, buy the Vanguard S&P 500, right? And so here's one of the things that when I talk about my reluctance to talk about this is I don't really have an incentive to, nor does any other investment advisor really have a lot of incentive to come and just give this information for free. When I first got in the business, to tell the truth, if you had $2,000 and said that you wanted to buy some mutual funds, I'd be like, great, right? The problem with that is what? What's 5% $2,000? Well, let's see.
What, 200?
2000, about $400, right?
Yeah.
It's not a lot of money, right? And when I first started as an advisor, I made $1,000 a month, right? And my expectation was, guess what? You got to make more money than the money that we're giving you. And if you had I had access to $20,000 worth of draw, but that draw you had to pay back. And so therefore, why would anybody spend time with someone that they're not going to make money with? Because it costs the same amount of money to raise 2,000 as raise 200,000, right? And so guess what? You spend your time raising 200,000, you spend your time raising $1 million. And oftentimes people that don't have a lot of investable, disposable money and things like this, nobody's talking to, right? And so I spend some time all the time going, okay, if my father would have had access to someone like me, what would it have been? My father, he worked as an executive chef, not for a major firm. So he retired. I think he may have had about $100,000. But $100,000 is not enough money to retire on, right? Luckily for him, he paid his house off and, things like this. So you had an IRA. Back in the 80s, you can get 12% off your IRA, but in the 90s, you were no longer getting that, right? And so now, how do you get to a place where your money in retirement is what it should be? And it has been the stock market. For the foreseeable future, it will be the stock market. And so we have to have these conversations in a very clear way.
So you mentioned it's the stock market. For those who are afraid to invest, or may not even know about the stock market, because you and I hold classes on, investment classes and, talk about the stock market in general to kids, to children, as well as adults. Why do you believe that our people are still so apprehensive about investing in the stock market? Is it because it's not taught in the school like it is, like in, say, Hinsdale or Naperville or wherever? What do you believe? What do you think?
So number one, I believe that nobody's actually teaching it well, right? They're not teaching it, not in Hinsdale, because they're teaching personal finance for the 99.9% of the time. When we get in our classes, we're actually teaching, investing, what it looks like to own an individual stock, how do you buy it, how do you evaluate a company, things like that, right? And so that's all the way on the other end. And so number one, that's it. But the other part is it's Palm Sunday, as you said, so we'll stay with the church thing for a little bit. Remember, I'm a preacher's kid, so think about the children in Israel, right? And I use this analogy a lot. The Promised Land, Moses led them into into the wilderness, right? Going to the promised land. They stayed there for 40 years, which was a generation, right?
Yeah.
Well, the older generation had to die off before they got to the promised land.
Yep.
And so when you look at the older generations before us, they did not invest, they didn't believe in it. And so therefore, you didn't hear those conversations about investing. You didn't hear people have success stories about investing, right? Their success stories were, I worked at this place for 30 years and I get my pension, I get my social security, right? Well, our generation, and this is the part that I fear, is that we still don't really hear the generation under us talking about it, right? And so therefore, will Generation Z hear the success stories necessary for them to commit investing early and things like this? Because it's not happening in a strong way, but it has to. Again, what are your alternatives?
There is no really true alternative. I mean, you mentioned something earlier this week when you and I were talking about those who teach financial literacy. You can tell how effective these classes are by looking at the results. And you said you saw a study that stated that there was a certain percentage that talked about
it. It wasn't a study.
Is that correct?
It was just like, so I had a conversation with very big a board member from a very big company known all over the country. They teach financial literacy, at least they say they do. And my statement to them was, we know it's not working, right? They've been teaching this for 50, 60 years. They focus on personal finance. There are a ton of people out here teaching financial literacy, right? And again, it's not working. How do we know? Because the debt ratio for credit cards is the highest that's been in the history of the world, right?
Yes.
And if their programs are working, then that would not be happening, right? Our participation rate in 401k plans have not been there. They tried to change it, and they changed the law that says you start a new job, then the job has to automatically put you into a 401k plan. Why? Because they know Social Security is not working. And they know that people are not saving enough money and stuff like this. So if those programs are working, then those other things, the data is telling us it's not working. So guess what? We have to do something different. We have to do something different for ourselves. We have to do something different for our kids. We have to do something different for our grandkids.
Right. So now I look at the lens from an economic standpoint, and I see what's going on because we're a consumer-based economy. The United States is U.S. economy, and as I mentioned, earlier this week I was speaking at this meeting. The U.S. economy is about $23 trillion in totality. Most of it is from consumerism. Yet over the last week or so, we've lost over $6 trillion because it ain't just because of the tariffs. It's not just because of tariffs, because you tariff. It's a tariff tax for any country that you're importing goods in. So let's clear that up. There's tariff tax when you're importing. That's why the BMW costs more in the United States than it does in Germany. Same thing with the Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen for other countries. So there's tariff tax on anything that comes in. It's a tariff tax. You pay for that. But when I was speaking this week, there were two representatives from TD Bank. They were even in agreement about how financial literacy is diluted, how it is not as relevant as it should be, particularly in the case of, the stock market. And, it's the same conversation, Terry, in 2025 than it was in 1997 when I started Eternal Light as it relates to financial literacy. They talk about credit, talk about budget, you talk about goal setting, you talk about, reading a balance sheet or whatever. But let me tell you, when I was with the North Lawndale Employment Network and I was teaching ex-offenders about financial literacy, they understood it, but the difference was, did they implement that in their daily life, to try to turn their life around. When I was working with the Lawndale Christian Development Corporation in the North Lawndale community, the executive director at that time was Sheila Barber. I was facilitating financial literacy workshops. We had a partnership with Shore Bank, and the partnership existed where if you teach the understanding basic credit, budgeting, and goal setting, then you go to a meeting at Shore Bank, which was on the south side. They'll give you a certain amount of dollars to start a bank account and to purchase a home. Do you know what the success rate was? Even though they were going to give them up to $10,000 to buy a home. Now we're talking like 2003. Do you know what the success rate was for that?
Well,
7%.
Please tell me at least 50%, right?
It was nowhere near 50%. Like it got as low as 7%, because they really were not taking advantage of the opportunity of investing in the future, and so when you think about that, it's the same problems that exist today, except for everything's more expensive now. And to your point, that's why people are using their credit card more. That's why going to these title loans and all these places are so popular still today, even though they charge like 150% on a loan. That's why this is tax season also, which ends this coming up week. The refund anticipation loan. People are still doing that in spite financial literacy being a thing. But when you are investing, that's a whole different stratosphere. But our people don't really understand the importance. I'm gonna give a shout out. You and I know Renita Gales. Sister Renita. She allowed us to come to her home, her family. It was about 15, 20 of them. They brought us to their home in the Bronzeville neighborhood, and it was a series. We taught a series of investments, stock market classes, and they invested. So it's unfortunate that we are not grasping the importance of investing and not realizing that financial literacy is just not even the foundation of the financial future that you should have.
I think you touched on something that's actually pretty funny. I shouldn't say funny, but the problem with what we're doing, and I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about most of the other programs. They're teaching personal finance. So when you teach personal finance, essentially you're teaching people how to get in debt. You're teaching them how to become good banking customers, because good banking customers take out loans and things like this. And, again, it's Palm Sunday. So, what does the Bible say about being in debt?
You should not be in debt. You should not be in debt. That's what it says. Now, the borrower is a slave to the lender. That means you have a debt to the lender. So, period. And, in Bible days, just like even before, as history records, before slavery, these were indentured servants because they had to work off that debt. And when they came to the United States, the first set of slaves, they were indentured servants. They worked that debt off. They became free. But then the white people who came over from Britain, they saw it, or Spain, they saw this as a huge opportunity to make them permanent slaves. So it became, you forever in debt to me, unless I tell you you're free. And that's kind of where we are today, Terry. Our mindset is we got to get paid. We got to work a second job. We got to work a third job. We got to work overtime. We got to try to make ends meet. But there are smarter ways than doing that. Investing is a vehicle.
Yeah, it's just, the rules are, right? Especially with investing, right? The earlier you start, you benefit from compounding interest. You don't have to put as much money into an investment in order to make your goal. and so that's just kind of the way it is. The part that where I think we're at, and the world is changing. You've heard me say that often. I think we missed it on some level, and it's not over. We still have some time, but what do we
Oh yeah.
see in the last last week? The market kind of reset itself. And why people were doing all this talking about Donald Trump and he's killing the economy and the tariffs are not, they're not working and things like this. Donald Trump's presidency is about a money grab. We saw it with the DEI stuff. We see it with the tariffs. Tariffs drove down market values, and then when he started saying we're taking them away, what did the market do? It rallied.
Yeah.
There's a video out there of him saying that Charles Schwab made $2 billion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the mistake? The mistake was we were not hammering the table telling people you should go and buy something. You could have almost bought anything and made money on it a couple of days later. It's kind of like the same thing happened during COVID. Right.
Yeah.
But what the market does not like, and I'll say this, and hopefully people understand it. The market does not like uncertainty, and when there's uncertainty, the first thing that happens is the market sells off. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's why you get big sell-offs at times and things like this. But that's also where opportunity comes. Right.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the boycotts. Right. In one of the earlier shows we talked about, we don't know, right away people are going, oh, Target is down and it's because of the boycotts. Can you please tell us why that's not the case? All right. So
want me to say why not the case?
We don't know. Yes.
Right. Well, reporting doesn't happen like that in real time as it relates to how it's impacted. It's usually the next cycle. It's usually the next quarter when the reports come out. So the stock market really wasn't impacted directly from boycotting Target because Target wasn't the only one down. This is not the same scenario as the Montgomery bus boycott in the early 1960s. It's not like that. You have the boycott. It actually hurt some Black businesses who have a partnership with Target. So if anything, it hurt their businesses because you're protesting Target, but yet you're impacting those minority owned businesses. But as far as like whether it was effective or not, you won't know that until like the next quarter. Likewise, I just got to bring this home. People used to say that, and people still say that, Mayor Nathaniel Booker is the best mayor in Maywood history. And again, that's a very lack of detail, very ignorant comment, because first of all, he's still in office and you don't know what the man has accomplished in totality until you find out if those businesses that he started are sustainable. Are they going to still be around in 4 years? How much of that was in the Book administration? How much of that was from Madam Edwina Perkins administration? So you can't give credit to somebody who didn't do the work. We won't know where he ranks until everything is all said and done. But right now, Mayor Joe Freeland is the best mayor ever in history. But if you don't know your history, then it's just his story. It's just your story. And you're telling a lie. And it's an insult to those who actually contributed to the Maywood economy and development. The other thing, Terry, is Joe Freeland, Don Williams, Yarbrough, Mayor Henderson Yarbrough, when they were mayor. Ralph Connor, when they were mayor, Little League Baseball existed, and every team was sponsored by a business. So that tells you that Maywood's economy was deep. So that means that there were at least 32 businesses that support Little League baseball. That's not the case today. So you can't say that Ralph Connor is not one of the top three, or Joe Freelon is not one of the top three, or Yarbrough is not one of the top three, or Don Williams built all those homes along Maywood Drive, and one of the Maywood Village employees actually bought a home on the drive. I'm not going to say the name, because people probably know what I'm talking about. But nonetheless, that to me is investing at its finest and worthy of giving result as one of the best. So it's saying synonymous. The boycott of Target, who's to say if it's effective or not? We don't know that. We won't know till later.
So let me give some depth to this, right? So what you talked about on quarterly earnings and things like this, that's two ways that's the accounting part. That's why I asked you that question. So from an accounting standpoint, right, we report these earnings every quarter, right? And from an investment standpoint, right, fundamental analysis says, hey, we don't make a decision about an investment until we actually know what those numbers look like. So they have reported lower foot traffic and things like this, but this is the part that people should pay attention to. From the investment side, and this is not a recommendation. I just want everybody to consider this because, again, holding a license, making recommendations, you have to go do all these other things, right? But here's the truth. Target is $92 or 90 something like this, right? Their dividend is 4.8%, right? So the valuation is, I think, right around 17 times earnings or something like this. And I know those are kind of big words and things. I don't want to confuse. I want to make it simple. Right. So we make decisions on, okay, 4.8% dividend. Is there a risk that the stock is that they're going to cut their dividend because they're not making enough money? We don't believe that that's the case with Target. Is there a better investment? Well, the 2-year treasuries, so you go out and buy federal bonds, that's paying 3.8% for the next 2 years. The 5 years, 4.1. So you get a better yield or dividend with Target. You get the upside potential that the stock would move from 120. From 92 to above 100. So not only do you get a great dividend, you get great capital appreciation. And more than anything else, the boycott did that, created value for investors. And we have to start thinking about what part do we want to be on? Do we want to boycott and do some of these things and don't really get the benefit that we're looking for? Or do we figure out how to be on the same side of the table and benefit from these companies that at the end of the day, the infrastructure for, Target and Walmart and all these things is so ingrained. Do we have Black businesses that can come and take over distribution and things like this? No. And yes, Black people have, $1 trillion worth of buying power. But in order to create, it's the same problem that we have with manufacturing right now. Black people can't create the infrastructure that we need, nor can the federal government bring manufacturing from China and Indonesia and into the American economy.
No.
We can't do it.
It's not realistic. It's not realistic to think that you're going to bring back manufacturing. You know how many years it would take to reestablish the manufacturing industry? That is crazy, Terry. In addition to that, we talked about being part of the movement. Saul Alinsky was a Jewish community activist, and he was all about investing. Sure, during his time, he protested. He had a book called Rebel for Radicals. talk about radical agenda and liberal and all this. But he was aggressive. He was an aggressive protester, but he was action oriented. And you know what he did? When they protested the business, guess what they did? They invested in that business. Do you know why? Because when you have a certain level of vote, you have voting power. And that's when the real movement comes in. We are a common shareholder, or we are a perpetual shareholder. So therefore, we have the votes to change the game. But when you are a consumer and you are protesting, if you don't have skin in the game, guess what? You're just another loudmouth. That's all you are.
Mm-hmm.
So you can protest for a day, protest for a week.
Well, that goes to, and this is very unpopular, right? We got the Jamal Bryants of the world. We got Al Sharpton saying that they want to boycott Disney and things like this. And to me, what that represents is what we talked about earlier, which is the children of Israel leading, and they led in the way that they knew to lead, but they didn't get to the promised land. Not the older generation.
Why didn't they get to the promised land?
Because the old generation. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You said it. You're saying it.
Yeah, the old generation just doesn't understand, right? They understand from their vantage point, right?
Yep, absolutely. So the only two people that came in was Joshua and Caleb. They were the only ones who made it to the land of milk and honey, the land of Canaan. They were the only ones. Everybody else had to die out. I mean, they could have made it into Canaan in 40 days. But instead, they just walk circle. They're circling the wagons. And as my late grandfather used to say, just spinning your wheels. You're spinning your wheels, son. You're spinning your wheels. You got to go forward. Take action. And that's why they didn't get in. That's why they didn't get in, But we got to think.
I 100% agree. Yeah, and that's the reason why, on some level, that you see me being willing to come in and engage with you, and do the master classes that we have, because there's not a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of bad information out there, right? There's no situation where you talk about you feel better about money and healing and all this other stuff. It's work, it's discipline. You got to go and learn what happens, why the market makes different decisions. Why does gold go up when there is fear of recession, right? Why does technology sell off in those same places, right? It doesn't matter how you feel. You have to understand it. And once you start understanding, again, your commitment level changes.
Absolutely. And Terry, in addition to that, why you also have to understand, as far as why did the United States exempt electronic products, smartphones, laptops, transistors, hard drives, semiconductors? Why did they pass those over? Why?
I'm glad you asked that question, right? Because you cannot drive the business community. They have to purchase those things. And you are literally hurting the business community when you do that, right?
Yeah.
Literally hurting the business community. And you think about what can be passed through. Well, do they even have the money to go and Donald Trump made a couple of announcements early in the year of Taiwan Semiconductor. I think they're building a plant here. There's no way they can build a plant here that's a semiconductor plant with these tariffs on the table.
Right.
So you have to exempt the companies in order to make sure it happens. Now, what do people say? Well, there's go the federal government taking care of Wall Street and not Main Street. People should understand that you have to take care of Wall Street in order for it to work.
Right.
Because I like talking about cell phones. The cell phone. I was in a meeting one time, and it was a community-based meeting, and people were talking about how bad things were, and things like this. And I said, everybody has a smartphone, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
where did the smartphones? Why can we talk on our smartphones now and look on the internet? Don't have to wait till 9 o'clock to make a call across the country. Well, that was WorldCom, and that was junk
Right.
bonds that came from the um, from Wall Street. Junk bonds then created WorldCom. WorldCom created competition, at lower
Mm-hmm.
prices, more value, and that is why. And we
Yeah.
all love the benefit of it, but we also have to be on the same side, which
Yeah.
is not being consumers, as you said, but also being investors. And
Absolutely.
once we start understanding that, then the conversations will change a little bit.
Well, yeah, and once you do that, Terry, when I think about Maywood, then you're gonna have businesses that's gonna make a real economic impact in the community. It's one thing to have a business, but it's another to have a business that's going to have an impact in the community. And so that's why I say we'll see where Maywood is 4 years from now, because as of now, they're over $8 million in debt. All right. And
Mm-hmm.
their salary is about to jump up tremendously soon. And who's going to pay for that? In this time, during these times where families are struggling, where the average household income in the village of Maywood is around $45,000, we're going to see where Maywood is as it relates to that. Are they going to increase the taxes to afford these increased payments of up to 400%? Are they going to finally put some homes on the road? All those businesses that they brought in, is that going to, where is that money coming from? And during these economic times, and Maywood is part of the overall economy, but just at a micro level,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to have money passed down that's going to make a difference in generating additional revenue? So those are the questions I have over the next 4 years. What is Maywood going to look like economically when these salaries kick in soon? And I mean, I see people doing this got you media stuff about what what Mayor Booker has done and other trustees, village manager. I mean, that's all important. But our focus in this space is, where is Maywood going to be in the future? Because we know where it is right now. They don't have a strategic plan.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a feasibility study. They are in debt, seriously in debt. They're fighting back and forth with the village, with the Maywood Park District. Okay, that does not move the needle. So where is Maywood going to be next year? That's not even wait 4 years. Let's see where it is this time next year. Is it higher? Are those businesses still going to be in place? Because every business, that's just about every business they started, is what, like 2%, like 2% profit margin for every single business that's open. So let's see if the accumulation adds up to make an impact in the community.
So
That's when you get to
before we wrap, I'll make this statement, and I made it in our last show, and I made it privately. Um, let's talk about just the overall, at a national level and things like this. So, we advocated really hard at the federal level for infrastructure on the Biden, roads, bridges, high-speed internet, commercial development in Black neighborhoods, right?
yeah,
Those things became federally funded
yeah,
under Biden.
yeah.
And Maywood, I don't know if they have a plan for high-speed internet, running it from every house, every business in Maywood. Um, if they miss this opportunity, if they don't get that right, that's a problem to grow the business community in Maywood. If they're going to commit to manufacturing, guess what? Manufacturing, what do you need? Two things that you're going to need for manufacturing. Um, you need high-speed internet, and you need chips from NVIDIA, right? And without those two things, you're vulnerable. And chances are they're going to go somewhere where they can stay competitive and can do the business the way that they want to. So, I hope this doesn't happen. But what is the risk for Kroger? Kroger's may have to leave because of the lack of investment in high-speed internet, right? And that's the part that is scary about Maywood, and the economics of Maywood and where we are as a country in relation to building infrastructure and things like that.
Right. Absolutely. You can't get into financial literacy.
And the other part, the other part, yeah. So the other part that I'll say about this is the thing that I said last week, right? You have this debt that you have to pay down, and it's hurting property tax values, right? And so, but you have this Bally's thing, right? Every single Maywood resident, I think, still will have the opportunity to be a Bally's investor. The village of Maywood, can you be a investor in the Bally's casino that you're still going to get the money coming from gaming and things like this? But, again, being an investor matters. It has a bigger benefit. And so, from a standpoint of leadership and all these other things, what should we be doing? We should be talking about what investments do we make? How do we make them? How do we benefit from them?
Absolutely. We should look at fundamental analysis, technical analysis. How does that look? What is the past performance portfolio of the industries? What stocks should you invest in? Maywood has a lot to learn as it relates to investing. But there are a lot of people who are familiar with finance in the village of Maywood. We just have to be more astute. We have to be more prudent with our finances, especially economically, because Maywood is insolvent right now. It's struggling. So we need to work to increase economics, because that's going to increase the rating. It's going to increase its bond rating. So obviously there's work to be done. Is it on the upswing?
So
yeah.
Did I hear that the bond ratings is junk? Is that a triple B?
Yep. That's what I think Trustee Brandon said. So there's work to be done.
All right. Well, listen, we've been at it for a little while. I'm going to go and try and catch a little more daylight and get on my bike or something. But it was important, I don't know how much we'll do this. We probably will have a show coming up soon about estate planning and stuff like that. Also important because, you have this turnover in Maywood, right? People dying and losing their properties because, it falls into probate or the family can't pay, the taxes and things like this. And so I hope we can get that show done in the next couple of weeks.
I'm sure we will. I also want to bring back, Mayor Booker, when he has an opportunity, now that the election is over, to talk about his first 100 days. If you want to bring on one of the other candidates with him, that's fine. But we want to focus on Mayor Booker. He is the mayor of Maywood, and I would like for us to talk to him about the first 100 days. He mentioned feasibility study, because all this about economics, like Ross Perot said, it's the economy, stupid. It's all about the economy. So let's see what he says, put his words to action, and, let's see where this goes as we bring in others who have won over this past election cycle, so they can talk about what the future of Maywood looks like, and even how they can improve on the 14% turnout, because that means 86% of the people did not turn out to vote. So there's a message behind that. So Let's see how that can be, improved. So let's see where we go. But this is great, man. Enjoy your bike ride. I'm gonna get ready for a finals week. My students got finals, so can create these exams. I love it, love it, love it. So have a blessed Sunday, everyone.
Fun.
Yeah, everyone be safe. Have a great week. You hear from us real soon. Everyone, may God bless you. Up until Easter, and always keep God as the head and not the tail. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff. God bless you. Be safe. Invest. Good night.